Hello, and welcome to this EM360 podcast. My name is Dr. Eric Cole, and I will be your host for today's podcast. I am the founder and CEO of Secure Anchor Consulting, a company that is focused on building out effective security roadmaps that actually work to protect an organization. In today's podcast, I'll be speaking with Rahul Pawar, CEO of Redsift, and Chris Bailey, Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Entrust. Today, we're going to talk about brand indicators for message identification, otherwise known as BIMI, and how Entrust and Redsift are working together to get people BIMI ready. Thank you both for joining me today. And if you could first let us know a little bit about yourselves before we get started, we'll have Rahul do a quick introduction, followed by Chris.
Thanks, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm Rahul Pawar. I'm CEO of Redsift. At Redsift, we focus on automated email security technologies. And the reason why we're here talking about BIMI is because BIMI sort of plays a key part of that security and deliverability puzzle. And it relates to the SaaS solutions that we provide that help organizations get BIMI ready.
And my name is Chris Bailey. As you mentioned earlier, Eric, I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development for Entrust. One of the things that I have done has been in this industry, the digital security industry, for over 20 years, and co-founded other companies like GeoTrust and startups, create some technologies that are used in everyday life, including one of the co-inventors of DV certificates, which are for TLS connections, and for EV certificates, which show high trust for TLS connections. And these are the connections that you use every day. When you're using your web browser, you see the little lock symbol. Most recently, we have a new item that we're going to be talking about today. I think could be very interesting.
Excellent. And Chris, why don't you start us off with letting the audience know what is BIMI and what are the benefits and how would they use it in their business?
Sure. Well, BIMI sounds just like it is spelled just like it sounds, BIMI. It's called Brand Indicators for Message Identification. And it actually is a way for organizations to transmit their logos in messages. In this case, we'll be focusing on email messages, in particular, Gmail.
And it sounds like the main benefit is really just sort of brand identification so people can recognize and identify and verify the brand that the email is coming from.
That's right. So it's a way to transmit that logo, or that, in this case, we're going to be talking about trademarks, that are officially connected to the company into the email message itself. So it's something that is new. It's something that most people are not familiar with because it is brand new technology. So we want to let everyone know about it, and it's going to be coming out soon for official use in major platforms.
I think one of the points to add, though, of course, that BIMI relies on a bunch of other technologies to actually function the way it was intended. And some of those technologies have some additional deliverability benefits that I imagine is of particular interest to marketers, certainly given the conversations that we've had with early adopters of the BIMI solution. So I think we'll get to that a little bit later in the conversation, but there's a combination of that visibility of the brand and the logo and some of the deliverability benefits that come as a side effect of implementing BIMI.
Excellent. In order for somebody to actually use BIMI, Chris, what are some of the prerequisites that are needed or required?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with BIMI, really is, like I said earlier, a way for you to transmit that logo over to a message, in this case, a mailbox provider. And we're going to be talking about Gmail in particular. But the prerequisites of that is it relies that you actually have a registered trademark in a jurisdiction we support. So say the US. So a registered trademark is basically an image that you actually file with the government. And you say, this is my image that I would like to use. And you actually can get that. However, it takes a few months to get those images registered. Many companies already have those registered trademarks, but maybe a smaller company doesn't. The other prerequisite that's critical to understand is it relies also on a technology called Dmarc. Now, Dmarc is something, it's called, it basically stands for domain-based message authentication and reporting and conformance. So that's a long word, but it's basically the security layer of this technology that authenticates the transmission of those emails to the mailbox provider in this case, and is the fundamental layer that we have to have in order to make this BIMI technology work. So those are the two things, and one of the things that we're talking about here is Entrust is providing some of the imaging technology for the verification of that. And of course, Rahul at his company, Redsift, is providing some of these Dmarc services. The technology on the image, when we actually take that image, we actually embed it inside of a certificate. A certificate is something that has information inside of it, including the organization name, where the organization is located, et cetera, and also the image itself. And we will actually use technologies to make sure that that information is transmitted over to the mailbox provider securely. And we actually say the word cryptographically secure. So it can't be tampered with. So these technologies together are the prerequisites to make the BIMI technology work.
Chris, when you mentioned certificate, could you provide a little more detail on what you're referring to?
Sure. The certificates that I'm talking about are called verified mark certificates. Verified mark certificate is a new type of certificate that Entrust actually initially created. The certificate actually contains all this verified information that I was mentioning before, the organization, where it's located, including the image. And that is the vehicle in which this information is sent to certain mailbox providers, including Google, which announced they're piloting this program in their Gmail environment. So that actually is literally the technology. A digital certificate is actually been around for a while, and it is usually issued by an organization that once they put this information in there, it's cryptographically signed and it becomes a digital certificate. And so this is just a specific type of certificate that contains these identity and image attributes.
So it sounds like with BIMI, you have Dmarc, you have VMC, the Verified Mark Certificate. Rahul, can you sort of help the audience sort of understand how all these pieces relate and fit together? So if somebody's going to roll out BIMI, what is sort of the process with VMC, Dmarc, and make that work with the whole process?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate there are a bunch of acronyms over here, but each of these technologies exist to solve, a very specific problem, and the whole solution space relies on these technologies building on top of each other. So, like Chris just mentioned, the VMC is great for saying, here's an image and here's a cryptographically secure way of relating that image to a particular domain, so that when Google, for example, displays the logo next to an email, they know that that logo has been trademarked, it's held by the right authority, you're allowed to use it, et cetera, et cetera. The next part of the puzzle is, well, how do we know that this particular email that's been sent was actually sent by an authorized service of that company, of the owner of that domain? And that's sort of where Democ comes in. Most people, aren't aware of all the detail over here, but one of the big challenges with transmitting email over the internet is that proving its provenance, proving its authenticity is actually a difficult task. That's why the Democ standard was created. It basically allows a mail receiver, so for example, a Google mailbox, to be able to verify that an email was actually authentically sent by a service that is authorized to send an email from a particular domain. Now, most people think their email is secure because they've got a username and password to their inbox, but you can think about email communication in the broadest sense. You have marketing solutions, you have servers in the basement, you've got HR systems, all these systems that communicate both inside and outside your organization using your domain. So a receiver has to be able to sort of pick all that apart and say, very quickly, is this authentic email from this domain? And that's where the Democ standard comes in. Now, BIMI relies on the VMC to verify that the image is appropriate for that domain, and it relies on Dmarc to verify that that domain actually sent this email. So while it seems like it's a big sort of layered standard, it's actually very straightforward what each of these standards are trying to achieve. So for people who are trying to get BIMI ready, Democ compliance is a necessary prerequisite. So they need to essentially get all the email infrastructure that is associated with sending outbound email on their domain and make it Democ compliant. And there are tools out there that help organizations do this. And, at Redshift, we provide a SaaS solution called On Dmarc that helps a number of organizations globally implement that standard in a safe, compliant way. One very recent example is we were helping a large telecoms company in the UK called TalkTalk deployed Dmarc, and the BIMI standard came along, and because they've deployed Dmarc, they're in a really good place to basically just flick a switch, get certified by our partners at Entrust, and get a VMC so that the email that they send out into end users' inboxes gets that BIMI stamp, that BIMI logo next to the email that they send.
Now, just building on what you said on the security front, I know it sounds like a lot of people with BIMI, it's sort of the logo and brand identification, but it sounds like this adds, when you put BIMI on top of Dmarc, a lot of security that can also help with phishing and spoofing attempts where somebody tries to spoof somebody's domain. Can you sort of elaborate a little more on some of the security benefits you get from deploying this solution?
Yeah, sure. So Democ's reason for existence really is to stop the very unfortunately very common type of spoofing and impersonation attacks that I think a lot of us have seen in the real world, right? Someone purporting to be from a tax authority, a bank, whatever the case might be, asking you to do something that you will do, or you may have a chance of doing simply because you trust the brand associated with it. So what Democ really exists to solve is to make sure that only authentically originated email can actually land in someone's inbox from that particular brand or entity. Now, the specific type of vector that it protects against is exact domain email. So, if you own the domain, like for example, in the example we just gave you of the telco provider, if you own TalkTalk.com, only services that have been authorized by TalkTalk.com can actually send an email from that domain. So if Joe Public, or let's say someone in their supply chain, receives an email from TalkTalk.com, they can be rest assured that it really came from that particular domain, or at least a service that's authorized to send from that particular domain. So one of the advantages of this purely technical solution is that you don't need to rely on people being trained, as it were, to spot things that could have come from somewhere else, or maybe has misspellings or points to obscure looking URLs to try and sort of provide this human layer defense. You can be assured that the Democ protocol will work with TalkTalk's implementation of it to make sure that you only get email that really came from an authorized service. So you have this sort of benefit that reduces the attack surface for someone who's fully implemented a standard like Democ. The other advantage that you get is that you also have the opportunity to improve your deliverability in some instances. It's very hard to put specific numbers on this, but generally, if you've got good email authentication, if you've got modern standards in place for security, standards that prove the provenance of your email, then generally you enjoy higher deliverability rates than someone who doesn't. So there's some side benefits that you get as a result of adopting these modern standards.
Excellent. Thank you, Raul. And I know we touched a little bit on sort of the brand identity piece, but Chris, can you sort of expand on how BIMI helps with protecting a brand, getting the brand out there, and growing an organization?
Sure. So as Raul mentioned, the Dmarc piece actually helps with the authentication of the email. That's the security piece. The BIMI image in this form we're talking about is a verified mark certificate. Cryptographically allows for that information to be transmitted to the mail client, the mailbox, and that quickly translates into, for marketers, one key thing. They're going to have a lot more of their brands in front of end users. So there's a huge amount of brand impression activity that can be achieved, especially the more emails that you send. So that's a pretty low hanging fruit for a marketer. The other advantages are mentioned cryptographically transmitted. You have control over that image that's being transmitted, and a security layer to make sure that image is actually your image. So it's a win-win-win situation for both the marketing side of the house, who wants to have more active, more immersive email experiences, more brand impressions, and also for the security side, you're actually transmitting this information securely, and you get all the advantages that were just mentioned from the Dmarc technology.
So just playing off of that, like you said, you sort of have an IT infrastructure security benefit of added security, better protection. And then on the marketing side, you have this better visibility. So in your experience, where does this typically get rolled out in an organization? Is this something that the IT department is driving and sells up, or is it something the marketing department is really pushing and then plays down to the security IT team? Or how do you see it best rolled out in an organization?
Yeah, it's typically we're seeing this first generation of people who are monitoring Dmarc technology by either the IT staff or the security group. But the BIMI technology, by the verified mark certificate that we're talking about here, is starting to roll into the marketing group. They're quite simply seeing a way for the marketing team to get more brand opportunities into their the emails that they're sending. So it's a bit of a mixed, but I would group. But I would say that it's starting to lean more towards marketing as more and more people find out about this technology.
I think the reality is that in order to actually deploy this technology successfully and efficiently, both teams really need to be working together to make it happen. We have sort of two work streams that have to start at the right time and join up at the end to really be BIMI ready as this goes live, because the marketing team has to pick the right logos, the right trademarks, make sure that the assets that they're trying to push out to end users have the right aspect ratios to render well in that environment, while at the same time the IT teams have to, really get their email infrastructure under control so that they can, reliably and safely deploy Democ in a sort of complete capacity. And both of those things could take time depending on the specifics of the organizations, which logos they want to deploy, the sophistication of their email infrastructure, and what they need to do to actually close the gap around that. So from our experience, we've seen the most success when both teams really understand the benefits that this could bring them, and they're pulling together.
So I know a few times you've both used during this conversation that it's being rolled out and sort of in the early stages. So sitting here today in mid-January 2021, where are we? Is this something organizations can utilize right now today, fully available? Are there only pieces? Sort of what's the current availability of the technology?
So the Dmarc technology is available today. And the VMC technology is available in a pilot form that we're currently testing, and it will be rolled out to production later this year. One of the reasons I think organizations should prepare right now is these lead times I talked about earlier, and that is the trademark. You want to try to get ahead of that, and probably in three ways. One, you want to make sure you actually have a registered trademark that you can take advantage of this technology, because the registered trademark could take months to get. Two, you want to try to make sure your registered trademark actually matches the current trademark that you might be using on your website, per se. So that's, for example, if the marketing team has changed the logo that they're using, but hasn't changed the registered trademark, you might want to make sure that those match. And then three, this is ideal for a square type image because that's the area that is going to be displayed within. So if you have a long trademark, it's basically several words long. You have to realize that it's going to be squunched up into a square, keeping that same aspect ratio. But it could be hard to see what your logo is if it's lengthy. So a square aspect ratio is a 1-to-1 square is really ideal for this type of technology, and understanding that and trying to get ahead of that is key. The Dmarc technology also is something that, depending on the size and complexity of your organization, it also could take some time to get that as well. So if you want to get ahead, and this is going to be a technology upon release, you're going to be have differentiation between others who actually are sending out their emails. You can get ahead of that by looking at these two things, and I think most organizations would not only just see the advantage of this, but it would be a shame if you want to prepare and you think you can get it the next day. You really need to make sure you have these technologies in place, and you need to prepare. I would say in the order of months. If you don't have these things, you need to actually have them. If you do have these things, you can get this technology in place very quickly. But these are the things that we see as something that most companies need to have a pre-check to make sure they're going to be ready for this technology.
We often get asked, just how long does it take to deploy Democ in a compliance mode, as it's called, for an organization, and that's a difficult one to provide a definitive answer for. But in our experience, if you're using good tooling, if you've got a very focused deployment team, if you're working with the right people, you can get deployed relatively quickly. But we're still talking in the order of weeks and maybe 1 or 2 months, not days. So if you really want to plan for this, then like Chris said, I would start thinking about this seriously now, because a number of these dependencies have to get laid out before you're really ready to finally publish your VMC certificate and have your customer base enjoy the benefits.
And I know it was mentioned a few times using Bimmy with Gmail. So it sounds like it's integration work that has to be done by the company. It's not something you simply go to Gmail and turn on an option, that there's a couple weeks worth of work that has to be put in place. Could you maybe provide a little more detail on that, Raul?
Sure. So the BIMI standard needs to be supported by the mailbox providers who receive email. So that currently Google is in the middle of a pilot, and Chris can talk about the number of brands that are actually being published and when we can expect to see that more widely. But BIMI was designed to be an open, interoperable standard. So a number of organizations have pledged towards the BIMI workstream, and we're expecting that to increase in volume as the year progresses.
As far as the timing of this, Google made an announcement that they were supporting the pilot of this program last summer. You can look it up with a Google verified mark certificate search to find it. But that's something that that they will probably end up releasing to the general public probably in the next several months. I think it'll be this year. And that date hasn't been confirmed, but we're feeling better about it. We're right now in a pilot test with several dozen customers. So you might be able to see this technology work. I can't mention the companies that are in the pilot, but there are several very large brands in the pilot. So if you have a Gmail account and you see these images pop up, you'll get a preview of what it could look like.
Excellent. So if somebody is listening to this and they're interested in Bimmy, they want to move forward with it, Raul, could you maybe provide some case studies or case examples of how an organization would approach this and start rolling it out, so when it's available, they can take advantage of it and be an early adopter?
Sure. some of the complexity over here is that it'll depend a little bit on your current state with things like Dmarc and email authentication, and it'll also depend on, as Chris mentioned before, the assets that you have and the current trademark registration state. Now, we have some tooling that can help figure some of this stuff out relatively easily. So we recommend that people who are interested in actually deploying this technology may drop us a note so they can go to one of our tools and they can book a free consultation, and we can have a look at their infrastructure from the outside, a relatively quick audit, as it were, and then we can pass on some information to figure out what the current state of the trademark situation is. So once we've had that initial conversation, we can get a sense of how much effort and how much time is really involved in getting from wherever that organization is right now to where they need to be to get the full benefit of BIMI as it goes live. So it requires a couple of people to be involved, as we've mentioned a couple of times. Obviously, we need some support from the IT organization to help get the email infrastructure under control. We'll need some help from the marketing folks at the organization to better understand what it is they actually want to publish and get their VMCs for. And that might end up involving some of the folks perhaps in legal, if maybe registrations have to be updated, or if we have to dig into getting a little bit more information so that we can do the validations, or at least Entrust can do the validation in an efficient, expeditious manner.
Excellent. But it sounds like, Rahul, probably the first step right now is really to get Dmarc implemented within your organization. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is. It's a necessary requirement, and if you go to the BIMI working group, you can see that you need to have Democ at a particular level of compliance. That implies you're going to have to do work to actually get your email infrastructure at a state where you can enjoy BIMI. So we've mentioned it a few times, but Democ is a well-adopted technology. Pretty much every mailbox provider is Democ aware and enforces it. So while BIMI is a relatively new addition to the family of standards, every organization that is sending email today can definitely benefit from getting their Democ house in order. They'll enjoy some security and deliverability benefits as a side effect of doing that, and they'll be ready for BIMI as it goes live. So they can definitely get benefit from kicking off a Democ project today.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. At the same time, they should be looking at their trademark status of which logos they might want to use if they do want to use this new technology. But they will get immediate benefits by just implementing Dmarc today. But because of lead time with the trademarks, they should be looking at their current situation.
And as we start to wrap up, I'd like each one of you to just give some closing remarks. If somebody is interested in BIMI, what other advice, what other next steps would you recommend that they take in addition to what we've covered? And let's go ahead and start with Chris.
Sure. So I think the next steps are, you feel free to contact either company. Rahul will be giving some information for RedSift. You certainly can contact sales@entrust.com. But you will need the Dmarc technology. So I would highly recommend contacting a Dmarc provider. And Rahul's company is a great company to look at doing that. And Rahul, I'll let you talk about your technology.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chris. We can certainly recommend that you have a look at doing this audit today, just so that you know where you stand and you're in a better place to make a decision. So like Chris said, that trademark piece is something that you really want to take a look at inside your organization, because we've been surprised by how many organizations that we work with didn't have the trademark that they expected, or it wasn't in the right jurisdiction, or it wasn't the right aspect ratio, or any number of these other smaller things. So I would definitely be doing that in the background, because that can always be surprising. And then with regards to the Dmarc piece, sure, we can help with that. You may be already somewhere forward on your Dmarc journey. We can also check to see what the status of that is, or maybe your IT team can help you figure that out. But either way, there's some publicly available tooling where you can go to. We provide a tool like a number of others do, where you can go and you can kind of send a test email, and our tool, for example, will give you a how BIMI ready are you check. All of this stuff is linked to some of the material that we'll be distributing later. And of course, as I mentioned before, if you actually want to talk to someone and have them help out and get a sense of where you are from a sort of expert point of view, we're happy to give 15 minutes of one of our customer service reps' time to you so you can figure this out.
Thanks to Raul and Chris for all their great insights on today's topic, and thank you to everyone who listened to our conversation. If you would like more information on what we've discussed today, make sure you head over to ondmarc.redsift.com/BIMI. Once again, that's ondmarc.redsift.com/BIMI to book your free 15-minute consultation to kick off your BIMI project.